Hey, what's good, everybody? It's your boy, See Through the Script here, and today is June 5th, 2021. I'm going to do something a little different, and instead of focusing on celebrities or politicians, we're going to look into the significance behind the recent headlines surrounding 215 children found buried under residential schools in Canada. I'm going to be discussing the direct ties between the Jesuits and the Indigenous people, so stick around as I show you some clips from the past to back up my findings. And for anyone who is new here, I'm going to essentially decode some of the history, as this is by no means a history lesson, more an analysis via the practice of gematria, an ancient practice that dates back to the Talmud and Jewish mysticism of coding numbers into letters. Then we observe those numbers and seek the hidden patterns infused within the date numerology. Before I start, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Without further ado, let's get started.
The majority of residential schools were run by the Catholic Church, but it's the only one where top officials haven't apologized for its role. And today experts say some Catholic organizations are obstructing efforts to find unmarked burials and identify children by withholding thousands of historical records.
All right, so check this out. On June 4th, 2021, which was yesterday, Trudeau calls on Catholic Church to take responsibility for residential schools. And this is a significant date to do so. And why is because June 4th could be written as 6/4 in North America, or elsewhere around the world they would write it as 4/6. And if you notice to your right, that Catholic has that gematria of 46 in reverse full reduction. Jesuitism has that gematria of 64 in reverse full reduction. 46, 64, and again, matching the date numerology. Within this video, a location of importance that we're going to discuss briefly is British Columbia Kamloops, and that is where these 215 children were buried under these residential schools. And notice British Columbia Kamloops has that gematria of 263. 263 is the 56th prime, and Society of Jesus equals 56. Again, we're going to continue to tie in the Society of Jesus in these residential schools. Next, I want you to take a look at some of the interesting findings I observed using gematria. And notice right away we have residential schools, which has that gematria of 207 and 81. And sexually abused has that gematria of 207 and 81. So they have that 2 for 2 match out of the 4 base. And obviously sexual abuse is something that these children suffered from immensely. And notice ritual has that matching gematria of 81 and 27, and 207 is a lot like 27 when you remove the 0. And notice alongside of that, Jesuit missionaries equals 81, and that matches with ritual, residential schools, and sexually abused. And who were the ones doing the abuse? Take a guess. And also notice how Jesuit missionaries equals 126, 215 children equal 126 in the same cipher, but also equals 270. And that's a lot like 27, right? When you remove the 0. And the 215 children are our prime focus within this presentation here. On this next slide here, I just want to go over again the importance of gematria and why, if you know it, you're able to see through these headlines and these numbers that they place within these headlines and these statistics they give you, and why a lot of them start to ring a bell when you start reading through these articles. And as I read through this, it stated that there were 150,000 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children forcibly sent to residential schools where many suffered abuse and even death. And again, notice how they ran with 150,000, 4 zeros. And when we remove the zeros, we're left with 15, like 15. Notice that Canada has that full reduction gematria of 15. We're going to explain how that number is very important moving on, especially in regards to the 215 children. On these next few slides, I'm going to be discussing the origins of the names of the different sectors of natives and where these names came from. And first and foremost, I want to discuss the First Nations and why they were called the First Nations. And as you could see, the First Nations were called Indians by Christopher Columbus when he landed in North America because he had thought he had reached India. However, many of them prefer to call themselves First Nations. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Christopher Columbus, so I'm not going to go into the history of him per se, but there is one thing we're going to focus on, and how Christopher Columbus was a devout Catholic, right? This is very crucial information, as it is the Catholic Church who are currently being pushed in the headlines to apologize to the Indigenous community of Canada. First and foremost is the First Nations. The First Nations is a term used to describe Indigenous people in Canada who are not Métis or Inuit. First Nations people are original inhabitants of the land that is now Canada, and were the first to encounter sustained European contact, settlement, and trade. Notice how First Nations has that gematria of 56 and 79, and Society of Jesus has that gematria of 56 and 79. Next, we're looking at the Inuit natives, and that essentially translates to the people, and basically they are the Indigenous people, the majority of whom inhabit the northern regions of Canada. An Inuit person is known as an Inuk. The Inuit homeland is known as Inut Nunagat, which refers to the land, water, and ice contained in the Arctic region. Notice how Inuit matches with Catholic and Jesuitism in our reduction ciphers of 35. Lastly, we're going to be looking into the Métis natives, and they are the Indigenous peoples in Canada and parts of the United States who are unique in being mixed with Indigenous and European, primarily French ancestry. And it's worth noting the Jesuits were formed in France. Now, notice the gematria of the Métis has that 6147, which is in line with Roman and Jesus. And again, Jesuits are the short name for the Society of Jesus, and they operate out of the Roman Catholic Church.
The Jesuits' residential schools near Spanish Ontario, where Indigenous children were sent after they were taken from their families, forcibly separated from both culture and loved ones, often neglected or abused. Many died. The consequences still echo through generations.
All right, now that last slide actually is a perfect transition into the next headline we're going to be looking into, which is again tying in the 215 children whose lives were lost. And notice on May 30th, 2021, flags were lowered for 215 hours. And again, it's in commemoration for the 215 children. Now, we're going to focus on the day that this ceremony, or ritual for that matter, occurred. And that was on May 30th, written 5/30 or 30/5, which is similar to 53 or 35 once the zero is removed. Notice that religion equals 53, Catholic equals 35, Jesuitism equals 35, so the reflections of each other. And again, we can also see the 46-64 connections alongside the reversible reduction. And why religion, Catholic, and Jesuitism is all important is it's the Catholic Church who are the controllers of these residential schools and trying to strip the native people of their religion and have them follow Catholicism, which is truly under the control of Jesuitism. All right, now this next slide is going to be focusing on the significance behind May 30th and why this day was chosen to commemorate the 215 Indigenous children buried under the residential schools in Canada. Now notice May 30th is the 150th day of the year. With the rules of numerology, when you remove the zero, you're left with 15. This is a big moment in Canadian history. Notice that Canada has that gematria of 15 in the most pure cipher. Also take note that May 30th leaves 215 days of the year. On Sunday, May 30th, Canada lowered the flag in tribute to the 215 lives lost for 215 hours on the day leaving 215 days in the year. Also, this occurring on the 150th day of the year is in direct reference to the popular stat that there were at least 150,000 Indigenous people suffering from abuse and even death after being forced to attend Jesuit-run residential schools. All right, now to your left, you can see a picture of the native Indigenous students alongside the nuns and the priest, at which all are Catholic. And notice how Indigenous people and the Catholic Church match for 2 out of our 4 base ciphers in the reverse category of 246 and 75. And again, this is just so convenient as it is the Catholic Church who were the ones overruling and overseeing the native Indigenous community. As the great phrase goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And this picture that you're seeing on this final slide is depicting the RCMP officers, the Jesuit priest, and the nuns forcibly trying to contain the native indigenous community. And again, this picture speaks volumes, as this is truly what was occurring during the time of the Jesuit reign that hasn't ended till this day and is only further enhancing themselves as people are less aware of their history, allows them to continue these same tragedies. But there you have it, folks. That is all I got for this video. And if you did enjoy this video, or if you did learn something from it, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I really do appreciate that. It really does mean a lot. But other than that, it's your boy Script, and I'm out of here.